Welcome to Healthy Hibbing, a show brought to you by the Hibbing Chemical Health Advisory Committee. Our mission is to promote the community's chemical health through education, prevention, and awareness. My name is Cheryl Bisping, and I am the Community Health Outreach Coordinator for Fairview Range and a member of the committee. I will be speaking to the Hibbing School Resource Officer, James Townley of the Hibbing Police Department, who is also a member of our committee. We will be talking about the social host ordinance in Hibbing. Welcome, Officer Townley. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
It's a really busy time of the year, I know, with school winding down, for a lot of people, very busy, and for parents as well, especially if they have a son or daughter who is graduating from school this year. There's a lot of things for them to think about in planning their graduation party. And a big part of that is deciding what food to have, who you're going to invite, and of course whether alcohol should be served at the party or not. So I wanted to talk to you about that aspect of having alcohol at a graduation party. What should parents consider when they're thinking about a graduation party and having alcohol where underage youth are present?
There are a lot of things to consider, and a lot more than I think a lot of people consider during something like that. And what happens is you have to look at the ages of the people that are going to be there, how many people are going to be there. If there's going to be alcohol, they have to be responsible for where the alcohol is, how accessible it might be, and things of that nature. It'd be a good thing for them if they know that there's going to be plenty of drinking to maybe arrange for transportation for the adults, of course, that might be drinking there. And then also I think it's their responsibility to be a good role model and to show their kids that they can drink responsibly and drink in moderation.
Okay. Are graduation or house parties an issue in Hibbing in the past? Has it been a problem?
House parties have been cited as the #1 source for our youth to obtain alcohol. And while we've done a pretty good job at limiting the commercial sales to our juveniles, we have a long way to go, I think, as far as limiting their exposure or their accessibility in social settings.
Can parents get in trouble for providing alcohol to underage people at their house? You know, how does that work?
Well, on a couple of things that I think I should bring up at this point. One is that it's still okay, according to our Minnesota statutes, to serve your own children at your residence, but you can't serve any alcohol at all to other people's children. Even if their parents said, oh, it's okay, it's still illegal to do that. So on the flip side of that is that it's been shown that while it sounds like a good idea to parents, our brains are developing from the time we're born till around the time that we're 25. And so what happens is and if you reflect on, and we all know people that have had difficulties with alcohol, and if you look at them, it isn't hard to see that they probably started when they were really young. So having alcohol at home with your children can make it so that they have problems with addiction later on in their life.
Right, because we know that their brains develop till up to age 25 or so, and if we put a chemical on a developing brain, it can change how that brain works for the rest of their lives. So
Exactly.
causing an addiction. So,
Yes.
so you brought up a good point about as a parent, if I have an underage youth in my house, my own child, I can serve them alcohol if I chose to do that. We don't recommend it, of course, but I could do that. But let's say my nephew or niece are over at my house, and even though my brother's fine with underage drinking and would allow him to have a beer, I would still could get in trouble for that.
You could.
Okay.
If the police were called, if somebody had alerted the police that there are a bunch of juveniles at your residence, maybe one of your neighbors doesn't realize that you're related and they're concerned, and they call the police and they arrive there, and these aren't your very own children and they don't reside with you, you could be charged with either furnishing or a social host violation.
Okay, so that's really important for people to know that.
Yes.
Just if you're going to do it, it's only with your own child.
Exactly.
Okay. What happens if you provide alcohol at the graduation party, and you have it, you're pretty responsible. You have it either put away somewhere and just the adults are supposed to know where it is, or you have it in plain view but somebody's monitoring that. What happens if a teen would get a hold of that beverage? Can you get in trouble for that as a host of a party?
Absolutely. You're responsible for everything that happens under your control of that, either that residence or if you own a public building as well. You're responsible for everything that happens there. So it's almost along the same lines as owning a firearm. You're responsible for the safe storage of that and locking it up. It's the same thing with alcohol. Whether you knew about it or not, you're responsible for the fact that these children or teens were able to gain access to it.
So you have to be able to be very comfortable saying, I know I have full control of this alcohol, that no student or youth is going to get access to it, because there is a potential for that to happen at a party when you're busy as a parent talking and visiting with your son or daughter's friends.
Yes.
So you really need to be aware
Absolutely.
of that. Okay. What happens if, as a parent, I'm not hosting the party? Summer's coming. We have not only graduation parties, but we know our kids like to get together and have fun in the summer. What happens if, say, as a parent, I go out, to the lake, or I take a vacation and my teenage son or daughter are home, and decide to have a party at our house while we're gone? Am I responsible for anything with underage drinking there?
Well, as far as social host goes, there's also a provision in the ordinance that would say that the child then, the person that, or the teen that was at your home and was responsible for the home at the time, can also be charged with the social host ordinance.
Okay, so if I really don't know, I might not be the one charged, but my son or daughter would be charged because they're the host. And
That's correct. But that doesn't totally eliminate you from the possibility of being pursued civilly for that.
Okay.
There's two laws. We have criminal law and we also have civil law in Minnesota, and so those are things to keep in mind. But
Okay.
for the most part, you're correct. If the parents are gone, they're on vacation, they have no clue that their child had intended to have a party, and people are charged or are found to be drinking there or in possession of alcohol, then your child would be charged. And it could be a number of counts for each person that's there.
Okay, so it could really add up to some fines for
Absolutely.
the son or daughter. Okay, and so you mentioned hosting, which we're talking social hosts, but also providing, which is a different charge, because if I have alcohol in my home, I'm providing, or maybe the son or daughter is hosting the party and some other adult provided the liquor. So there's So there's different elements coming into play.
Exactly, and I think to clarify the social host ordinance, the social host doesn't mean that you're furnishing alcohol to you're just allowing it. And it's your inactivity and your failure to take responsibility over the situation that you would be charged for. Furnishing is a whole nother thing, and coincidentally, the charge for the social host ordinance for violating that is a misdemeanor, which is up to 30 days in jail and a $700 fine.
Okay, all right. And you brought up a good point about other things that can happen if a teen gets hurt while they're, under the influence of the alcohol that was provided at the party, like they get into their car and get into the crash, or something else happens to them, then there could be other charges.
Oh, absolutely. The social host is a misdemeanor, and the furnishing, if you were found to be having furnished the alcohol for these, is a gross misdemeanor. That's up to a year in jail and possibly a $3,000 fine.
Okay.
And so that would be the maximum penalty for a gross misdemeanor for furnishing. But on the other hand, too, there are other things that, other laws that could be violated there. If somebody leaves your residence after having been served alcohol or consumed alcohol, and they get into an accident, you could be responsible criminally and civilly for that person for charges up to and maybe including manslaughter, which is a felony.
That's a huge responsibility.
That is a very huge responsibility.
Yeah, for thinking of a graduation party versus even if my husband and I hosted a party with alcohol, just in general at our house, it's a liability if somebody leaves any residence that if they're intoxicated and get in a crash. A lot of people don't consider that, I don't think.
No, and it could be several counts.
Wow. Are there any other charges or fines that parents should consider when they're thinking about having alcohol at a graduation party? Anything that I haven't mentioned yet, or?
Well, there are things that could happen. As we mentioned earlier, there are like civil penalties. The statutes also allow for civil repercussions, we'll say.
Okay.
And the thing is for each person that might either be injured or killed in a situation like that, that could add up, and that could account for many years in courts over those violations. And as far as like the juveniles, those are things too that the juvenile can be removed or suspended from whatever sport they're in.
Sure.
They could, if they're on the honor roll or they're in the honor society, they could be suspended from that. It could affect maybe scholarships that they've already been granted.
Okay.
And it could also affect maybe the colleges that they were accepted into. Those are things that they need to consider. And for adults, if they hold any kind of a license, like say they're a doctor or an attorney or anything, a teacher, they could lose their license if they're found guilty of that, depending on what their license requires of them.
So nothing to take lightly in making that decision whether you should have alcohol or not. I know we had two sons we had parties for, and we decided, no, it's not worth the risk. It just wasn't for us.
And I don't think a lot of people really realize that.
So it's a good topic to talk about. Is there any other time of the year that parents should be considering with their teens? Summer's coming up. Any other things you can think about that parents should be thinking about watching their teens with? And
Well, I think all year round, 365 days a year, parents should be in tune with their teenagers. This is an important time And you only have so much time with them
True.
while they're growing up. And so I think making sure that you know who their friends are and that you know their parents as well.
Correct.
And maybe providing transportation for them if they need it. We're the number one influence on our children's lives.
Yep.
And starting from a very young age, we can have a very positive influence on them as far as what they accept and what their standards might be.
Yeah.
And so as they're growing up, by the time that they're a teenager, you'd hope that what you've instilled in them would lead them to say, no, I'm not interested in drinking and I don't want to hang around or go to this party if there will be drinking because I don't agree with that and that's not acceptable.
That's some good points to consider as, how we talk to our kids all the way from when they're young to
Exactly.
their, what our expectations are. If we have high expectations, they usually come up to meet them, and if we have really low, I've noticed then, they're not going to work really hard to achieve that. And communication is really important. Most teens have cell phones, and I know one of my rules was you call me when you get there, you call me before you leave, so I know when you're going to be home. And I've known to call friends, parents, and say, hey, is there going to be adults at the house?
Exactly.
Because
very good. That's a very good point. And we do the same thing. I always want to make sure that I touch base with the other parents, just to make sure that it's number one, okay with them. Number two, that they're actually going to be there.
Right.
And that they're okay with everything.
Okay. So make sure that they're on the up and up with you because, teens sometimes aren't. All right, I have a question. What happens, if an underage drinker shows up at your graduation party that you're hosting and they're already intoxicated? We know the kids go from one party to another, or they leave their party and go to their friend's party. Can you get in trouble for that, and what should parents do?
I think that brings up a number of issues. One is that this person is underage and they're under the influence of alcohol, and they traveled there, whether they drove there or they rode with somebody else that was drinking. So what I would do is I would call the police right away and have them, and I'll tell you why that is, because it'd be difficult for you to defend yourself once maybe something happened there, and maybe one of them got injured at your residence and the police had to arrive. That's still, you're still condoning this type of behavior, and your inactivity is, if you were to avoid something like that, would also create a social host type violation for you.
So it might be a difficult situation that you face.
It is.
But something you should kind of mentally prepare for that could possibly happen, and very likely could happen at your party.
Yes.
So don't be afraid to call they'd call 911.
Exactly.
Okay, for help. And you actually have to think about it, I suppose, as we're trying to save a life.
Exactly.
They get in their car and drive away, and who knows what can happen. So don't be afraid of law enforcement to come and help and save a life in that situation.
Even if they're angry with you or their parents might be angry with you immediately, you know deep down that you may have saved them from a real tragic event.
Yeah, you have to put yourself in your parents' shoes. If that was your child and they got into a situation, would you want somebody to help them?
Exactly.
And you might not like the fine or the jail time, but you wouldn't want your son or daughter hurt. So
exactly.
Good points there. I want to thank you for coming here today and being our guest on our show. Is there anything else you wanted to ask or to say?
I think I would just like to wish or congratulate the 2016 graduates from the Hibbing High School. And I wish them a successful college pursuit and hope the best for them.
As do I. And I'd like to thank Officer Townley again for joining us, and for you for watching this edition of Healthy Hibbing. Please check out our Facebook page and our website for more information and health-related topics. We do have resources for parents on our healthyhibbing.com website. Until next time, have a safe and healthy day. Thank you.